Welcome into the Inside Scoop. We are live from Nashville, Tennessee, and today is Wednesday, April 9th. I'm your host, Josh Newberg, and we are here to talk recruiting. We got a lot to cover because there's a lot of spring games this weekend, so we are going to get into it. And on today's show, we're talking Tennessee, Michigan, Alabama, and Ole Miss. Big show. Let's get to it. Let's talk some Tennessee recruiting, and in this update, we're focusing on the running back position. We got Austin Price from VolQuest, and Austin, two huge visitors at the running back position. Number one, running back Saban Hyder was there this weekend, and then Derek Cooper wrapped up his visit on Monday. So let's start with number one running back Saban Hyder. We've talked about him a lot on this channel. Where do you think Tennessee sits after this visit?
I think Tennessee is deep in it. They're right there with Georgia and Michigan and Ohio State. Tennessee's done a nice job with him. I continue to call this like the posturing period, and I equate recruiting right now to like the restrictor plate races, in NASCAR. Like you're riding around, just kind of finding your right spot here because the closing 20 laps is about to come, and you want to be in the right spot to try to position your way to draft to the front. So, Tennessee's done a nice job with Saban Hyder. His mom had a great time. He had a great time. He'll be back for his official visit. And, I think that Tennessee's still got some work to do, but I do think that they're a realistic option for the number one running back in the country.
Yeah, that's very impressive. And then on Monday, Derek Cooper, one of the top backs in the country from the state of Florida, was on campus. What do you make of Derek Cooper's recruitment to Tennessee?
Yeah, I mean, that was one where Tennessee's just kind of started to get a little more traction there. He had enough interest to come up. Tennessee's battling it out with, a bunch of big-timers there for him. And, I would not put Tennessee as the lead team by any stretch of the imagination, but they have his attention enough for him to give them a look. And so we'll see if they can get him here for an official visit and make sure he gets here for an official visit. But Tennessee, Hyder, Cooper, Jonas Walton, Amari Latimer, all the kind of running backs that Tennessee's after in this class.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to ask you. Who do you think are these guys the top priority at the running back position? Maybe Derek Cooper, they got some room to make up. So who are the highest priorities for Tennessee in this running back cycle?
Well, I think it starts with Hyder. I think Hyder's the guy that Tennessee's been in on the longest. He seems to definitely be, at the top of the board. And then after that, you got to get Amari Latimer up here for a visit for that to be real. A lot of chatter about him wanting to end up in the North. His brother plays up there at Wisconsin. Michigan's heavily involved there as well. And then Jonas Walton was just here, and Tennessee seems to have his ear a good amount. So those would kind of be the ones that I would label as I wouldn't say the pecking order, so to speak, but I do know Hyder is at the top.
All right, wanted to hit on a couple other visitors from the weekend. A couple in-state guys made it to campus over the weekend in Craig Tutt, Carson Sneed, among others. How's in-state recruiting going this year for Tennessee?
It's going well. Obviously they've got Sneed committed. They've got Tyreek King committed. Tennessee just offered a couple of in-state players this past week, and Luke Thompson, safety from over in the mid-state, and then Zayden Anderson, the speedster, state track champ from Greenville, which is the same high school, and he's cousins with new Tennessee signee Jacoby Gillespie on the basketball front. So, in-state recruiting is going well. Tennessee will have Tyreek King on campus this weekend, another Tennessee commit, and they'll continue to swing at some other players in state.
All right. Well, Tennessee fans coming off of a big weekend of recruiting, they want to know, Austin, when's the next big visit weekend in Knoxville?
Well, it's this weekend. It's the orange and white game. You have Ken S. Sullivan from Virginia coming down, Chase Johnson, DB from the state of Georgia. You have a couple of linebackers and Rodney Colton and Braden Rouse that are slated to be in. Defensive lineman Jeremiah Williams from the state of California is supposed to be here. They'll have Tennessee commit and Chattanooga Baylor product Gabe Osinda in town. Like I mentioned, Tyreek King and then Justin Murphy as well. So Tennessee, shaping it up here for the big orange and white game this weekend, and then we'll get into kind of that last 20 laps in recruiting, which is made in June before decisions in July.
Yeah, recruiting starting to heat up as the weather starts to heat up. Tennessee fans, jump on board, hit subscribe. We're going to be talking about the Vols for a long time on this channel. Austin Price from VolQuest, thank you for dropping by with this Tennessee intel.
Appreciate you.
Michigan recruiting. It's been a little bit since we've seen a commitment from the Wolverines. Some call this a lull in recruiting. Some people on your site, EJ, are panicking. So, do you think there's an underlying issue here, or is Michigan just building some momentum toward a big summer?
I wouldn't say building momentum. You haven't had a commitment since late February when Bear McWhorter committed. Right now, two of the three commits are 3 stars. You only have three commits on board. I think historically, Michigan likes to close with recruits later in the cycle, especially during summer official visits. So June will be a big month for Michigan. They can build momentum then and turn it into fall momentum, which is obviously flip season, more official visits, signing day around the corner. And that's when Michigan got their majority of big wins last year. Remember,
Right.
they flipped Shamari Earls from Georgia. They flipped Bryce Underwood from LSU. They flipped Jordan Young from Clemson. They closed with Nathaniel Wusu Boateng on signing day. So Michigan fans should not panic. I think it's maybe a little bit of a slower start than usual, but at the same time, it's not like Michigan comes out running out of the gates. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and that holds true in recruiting in general.
Yeah, and over on the Wolverine, you guys wrote a great story addressing some of the fans' concerns, and I thought the article was great, very level-headed. You were quoted in there, and I liked your take as well. But reading the message board comments, I mean, there is a good bit of panic, and I just can't figure it out because we're not even 5 months removed from Michigan pulling off probably the biggest recruiting win in the last decade in flipping Bryce Underwood from LSU. I mean, heck, a year ago at this time, EJ, there was no thought of Michigan having what it takes to compete for a Bryce Underwood. Now here we are. He's already early enrolled, and Michigan is just a couple months removed from that. But has anything really changed? Do you see an underlying issue here, or are fans just kind of getting ahead of themselves on the message board?
I think you kind of have to take a median on this. You have to take a level headed approach when you read things like that. One, on the positive side, Michigan has the backing. It's not going anywhere. Michigan has a huge alumni base. They have people willing to pour in to NIL. They have one of the biggest donors in the country with the Ellison family. So
Mm-hmm.
I am not concerned about Michigan not having money, which is a large part of it. You know, you have to compete in NIL
Absolutely.
and recruiting in this era. So Michigan has the backing. I'm not concerned about Michigan's backing. Now, the moving parts piece that we wrote about yesterday is Michigan's in jeopardy of losing their general manager, Sean McGee, who has spearheaded the movement of modernizing Michigan's NIL approach in terms of recruiting. Losing Sean McGee would be detrimental for the future. They already have his plan in motion. He's a guy with NFL experience coming over from the Chicago Bears. He's implementing sort of a salary cap type of model, an
Mm-hmm.
NFL type of model, while still getting Michigan and those around the program to pay for the bigger, 5-star level names like they did with Bryce Underwood last cycle, like they did with Ty Haywood last cycle. So their vision for the future has not changed. What is not happening right now is Michigan is not talking exact numbers with recruits on visits. So you look at guys like Javian Osborne who visited, they didn't get a number. Notre Dame gave him a number. You look at other guys that are visiting, Calvin Russell, he's a top 100 wide receiver, didn't get a number. That one's going to be NIL heavy.
Mm-hmm.
You saw Pete Nako's report that Michigan's not in the top three for Jackson Cantwell. Didn't get a number. He's going to command north of $1 million. Schools like Miami, Georgia, Oregon, they're already talking numbers. And, this isn't, a knock on those kids. They
Yeah.
have market value. This is just it's the situation. It is what it is. It's the era of college football recruiting right now. So I think with Michigan, those are the two pieces. You may be losing your general manager, who is underpaid, only making $400,000. Michigan had Courtney Morgan on staff. He's making north of $1 million, almost 3 times as much as Sean McGee, maybe 3 times as much at Alabama. So, you're underpaying Sean McGee. If he goes, do you pay more money? You're not willing to invest in Sean McGee. So are you going to invest in a general manager that is adequate at running NIL and building relationships with agents and can continue this plan or formulate his own plan? Who knows if you're underpaying at that position? And then, like I said, on the flip side of the coin, you're not seeing early momentum build because Michigan's not talking exact numbers like other schools. That's not to say they won't talk exact numbers down the line.
Now,
because
EJ,
yeah,
let
so
me play devil's advocate here. Maybe this is a strategy, right? Because it didn't impact Michigan's ability to go flip Bryce Underwood in November because they didn't talk numbers with him in April. It didn't impact Owusu Boateng when he made his decision in December. Maybe this, and I'm playing devil's advocate, and I'm not talking necessarily to you. I saw a lot of these comments on your story on the message board, and I just think that maybe this could all be a strategy because maybe you don't show your hand right now if you're Michigan. If you know you have the money, why start the bidding in April when you can start the bidding in late November, similar to how you did with Bryce Underwood? You know what I'm saying? Like, this could be all a strategy by Michigan.
Yeah, I don't think you're playing devil's advocate. I think you have a point. You look at schools that are loading up on commits right now. USC, they lost a ton of commits last cycle. You look at Notre Dame, they lose commits all the time. They lost plenty of commits last cycle. Those schools that are offering numbers right now are more likely to lose commits down the line when the prices go up, right? Mm-hmm. So I think for Michigan, it is a little bit of strategy. They are also waiting to see how the rev share situation impacts college football recruiting. Definitely. Obviously, we kind of go into that on July 1st, which is when official visits are wrapping up. They want to see, what the court rulings are on that before they kind of finalize their plans and start talking exact numbers. So just because they lose some recruiting battles right now, if Javian Osborne goes to Notre Dame, if Jordan Thomas goes to Ohio State, what does it matter? They're not signing with those programs right now. Michigan has the backing, and if they talk exact numbers later in the cycle, they can always flip those kids just like they did last cycle with their biggest wins. Like I said earlier, Shamari Earls, Bryce Underwood, Jordan Young, those were all flips. Those were all guys you talked exact numbers with later on in the cycle. So I don't think the fact that Michigan isn't talking exact numbers is something to really paint out. Frustrating because you want to build some momentum heading into summer official visits. But Michigan has a long-term vision, and Sean McGee has a good plan for the future of how Michigan will handle everything once rev share comes into fruition, once those court rulings are finalized, and they head into the more important part of the recruiting cycle, which is fall and winter as we get closer to signing day. But the big thing here for Michigan now is keeping Sean McGee so that the vision is completed, because if you lose Sean McGee, that vision is kind of gone, and you have to either start from scratch or find somebody that can build on that model. So that's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, yeah, the interim is frustrating. The long-term vision, I think Michigan will be just fine. And there are recruits that understand that. Don't get me wrong. Like, there are recruits that want immediate dollar figures right now, but there are recruits that are playing the long game. Savion Hyder is one of them. They just had his agent on campus over the weekend. I talked to the father of John Turntine, top 100 offensive lineman who will surely command NIL. They are fine with Sean McGee's long-term plan, but again, you have to keep Sean McGee in order for that long-term plan to come true.
All right. Well, very level-headed approach you got there, EJ. Speaking of momentum, when will the next big visit weekend be in Ann Arbor?
Yeah, I mean, this weekend will be a big weekend. They have five-star quarterback Ryder Lyons coming to campus. I think that, he's been the guy for quite some time at the quarterback position, technically a 2027 since he's part of the LDS church, but still, the guy they see as the quarterback taking over for Bryce Underwood once he's gone. That's Ryder Lyons,
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be their first opportunity to make a big impression on him and his family. They have some other 4-stars coming in as well. Davion Brown, a big-time wide receiver out of Virginia, will be making his way on campus. On 300 defensive back Andre Clark, another Virginia native, will be on campus as well. They'll have some 2027s, but I think the cycle or the spotlight here this weekend really starts with Ryder Lyons. And again, they're not going to talk exact numbers with Ryder Lyons right now. They will later on. And I think, Josh, pre-show, we kind of talked a little bit about some of these 5-stars, Ryder Lyons, Jackson Cantwell, Savion Hyder. There will be discussions with these guys later in the cycle. I can guarantee it, especially if they keep Sean McGee. So, I don't care if Michigan doesn't have the lead for Ryder Lyons right now. I don't care if Michigan isn't in the top 3 for Jackson Cantwell right now. I care in November.
Yep, I agree with that. And Michigan fans, talk to us. I am curious. Here's what we're going to do. I want to know your level of concern, 1 through 10. 1 being no concern at all over Michigan recruiting. 10, I am panicking. Let us know. Drop a number in the comment section below. Let's talk a little Alabama recruiting this weekend. A-Day, which means top recruits will be on campus. We got Andrew Bone here with Bama Online. But first, Andrew, I want to talk a little quarterback recruiting. Who is on the board right now, and is Alabama closing in on a commitment?
Yeah, there's not many guys that Alabama's recruiting at the quarterback position, and the ones that they have recruited over the last 7 or 8 months are all committed elsewhere. They were committed elsewhere when they extended those offers. So as of right now, Alabama is going after Derek Zammit out of New Jersey. DePaul Cadley, this kid they offered mid-February. He's going to be making his first trip to Alabama this weekend. Arrives on Friday. He's going to stay in town until Sunday morning. So this is going to be a big visit for him, big visit for Alabama to kind of see where they stand. And he's going to make a decision in the next couple of weeks. Not really wanting to go through the summer official visit gauntlet. Wants to decide before the officials start and just take one visit this summer. So we'll see kind of how things shape out this weekend. I spoke to him the other night. We got a great story, preview story about his trip to Alabama on BOL. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens because this is really the only guy that Alabama, in my opinion, as of right now, has a potential chance to land. Now, if they miss out on him, he ends up going somewhere else. They're going to have to kind of regroup and circle the wagons and kind of see, who's going to be out there this spring that's available, who they might go after. And they, they did that last year with Keelan Russell. They went out and saw Keelan during the spring, and he didn't get an offer from Alabama until after the 8A game last year. So they might have to do that again this year, but we'll see what happens with Derek Zammit this weekend.
Yeah, and having a guy like Keelan Russell already on campus kind of allows them to have a little more patience this cycle at the quarterback position. I like it. All right, let's move on and talk some A-Day visitors. You guys have a huge list up on Bama Online. You fans can go check that out right now. But one name stuck out to me, that's Jet Washington. He's going to be on campus in Tuscaloosa. He's a top safety target out of Las Vegas. How do you see the Tide sitting with him right now?
I think Alabama's in that top group, maybe even in the top 2, top 3 for Jet. There's a guy that visited Alabama last season for that Georgia game, and what an unbelievable atmosphere that was for him to see. And now he's coming back for the first time this year. Now, he's been pretty busy with his schedule. Football team won state championship. Then he went into basketball. So this is kind of his first time to get out, go out and see Alabama this year. So this is going to be a big visit, another big visit for Alabama as far as an out-of-state target. And they're not recruiting a ton of safeties in this cycle. And they still want to add 1 or 2, and Jet's been right at the top of their list since last season. I mean, this is a guy that they went out and saw play last fall, and he's really one of the only juniors that got a visit from the Alabama coaching staff during his regular season. So we'll see what happens this weekend. I know Oregon's a top school for him, USC. There's some other contenders that are out there. I expect him to set up an official visit with Alabama this weekend. So we'll see him back in Tuscaloosa at some point this summer. But, Alabama is certainly excited to get him on campus. He told me the other night he's going to be arriving on Friday. So he's going to spend 2 days at Alabama. So I know the Alabama coaching staff is really excited to get him back in town.
Yeah, it sounds like it should be a productive weekend for Jet Washington. Now, what other big names are we anticipating being on campus this weekend?
Well, I think looking at in-state, you got two big in-state guys that are going to be on campus. Xavier Kroll, the number 2 running back in the country out of Jackson High School in Alabama. It's going to be his 3rd visit to Alabama this year, 2nd trip to Tuscaloosa in the last 3 or 4 weeks. Definitely one of Alabama's premier targets in this recruiting class. Alabama only signed 1 running back last year. Running back's a big position for them in this class, so they're going to have him on campus. Another running back, Jonas Walton from Georgia Central High School in Carrollton, also going to be on campus. But one other in-state guy that's pretty intriguing is Jaquez Wilkes out of Wadley High School, 6'4", 220 pounds, plays on both sides of the football. And this is a kid that ran for over 300 yards during the state championship game and had over 8 tackles and 1 interception in the game as well. So just a tremendous athlete. This is going to be his first time visiting Alabama at all. But he's an in-state kid that Alabama really likes. And one other out-of-state guy that we're keeping a very close eye on is Sincere Johnson out of Ohio. This is a guy that received an offer back in January, attended Alabama's junior day on February the 1st. Might come down to an Alabama-Ohio State battle. We kind of saw that last year with Justin Hill, who came down from Ohio, attended Alabama's A-Day game, ultimately signed with the Crimson Tide. But Sincere is a kid that has family in Alabama, but grew up an Ohio State fan. So we're gonna see kind of I think, in my opinion, a head-to-head battle there. But there's some other schools involved. He's going to take some of our official visits and go from there. But big for Alabama to get Sincere in Tuscaloosa again for the A-Day weekend.
All right, so I know last year, the first full cycle under Kalen DeBoer, Alabama really turned it on during the summer. But with A-Day around the corner, do you have anyone on commit watch this weekend? It doesn't, it could be 2027 class or younger, but is there anybody you're watching? Inside Scoop listeners, I've got to tell you about Game Time. Now, here's the scenario. You've been rooting for a team your whole life, right? They finally have a good season. You want to go to the game with your friends and family, only to find out completely sold out. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down as the game gets closer to the kickoff. With killer last-minute deals, all-in pricing, and views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Game Time is the official ticketing partner of the Inside Scoop. Now, with summer approaching, there is nothing better than catching an afternoon baseball game. And Game Time has the best last-minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Game Time picks make last-minute ticket buying easier than ever by highlighting the best deals in the stadium. So here's what we're going to do. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code INSIDESCOOP for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, though, create an account, use redeem code INSIDESCOOP, INSIDESCOOP, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
I think with the 26 group, a lot of those guys have all of their summer official visit dates set. They want to get through the summer. And, we used to see a flurry of spring commitments back in the day because official visits didn't take place until late in the fall. And now, these kids can take all their summer official visits, make their decision before the start of their senior season. So I think we're kind of, waiting to see what happens. I'm not saying these guys are going to commit, but some guys that we are going to be watching pretty closely this weekend include Xavier Kroll, who could potentially make a decision early. He does have his 5 official visit dates set. He's going to take. He wants to take these visits. He plans on waiting until the season, but with his third trip to Alabama this year, Alabama's been one of those schools that has really been at the top of his list from the get-go. That's a guy that we're going to keep a close eye on just in case. Another player, in-state player, Kamarian Johnson, out of Muscle Shoals, defensive lineman. He does have 4 official visits set for the summer right now, and also intends on waiting, but it's a guy that grew up an Alabama fan, has been to Tuscaloosa a few times this year already. So if there's some guys that we're watching, those are probably the ones that we're watching the closest right now, but could also still see them take those official visits into the summer and then make a decision.
All right. Well, it's not your traditional A-Day, but it will be an exciting time in Tuscaloosa this weekend. Bama fans, talk to us. Who is your most anticipated visitor this weekend? Let us know. Let's talk a little Ole Miss recruiting. We're going to focus on the quarterback board because Steve Wiltfong, On3 national analyst, dropped a new prediction. I got Billy Embody here from OM Spirit. But before we get into that prediction, Billy, there was a 5-star quarterback on campus for a multi-day visit. We're talking Rider Lions out of the state of California. What are you hearing on the latest intel after that trip?
A 5-star quarterback Rider Lions was back in Oxford for what I believe to be the first time since last summer. He made the trek out there for multiple days, got a chance to see spring practice under Lane Kiffin. And, after watching this season unfold for Jackson Dart and his rise up the quarterback board, I think you're seeing Rider Lions kind of see himself a little bit more as a Ole Miss quarterback, and just kind of the big physical skill set that he brings to the table, kind of similar to what Jackson Dart brings as far as a little bit of a run or two, that toughness, that edge to his game. Rider Lions sees a lot of that. So he got to spend a lot of time with Lane Kiffin, Charlie Weiss Jr., Joe Judge, who's coaching the quarterbacks as well, and kind of can see the path to development and how that works out, because, of course, he's going to take his mission trip. So he's not coming to a college campus for a minute after he graduates from high school. So that is something to keep an eye on with Rider, of course, through his development. But he left Ole Miss feeling pretty good about where they stand. They've long been after him. They do have some ties with the LDS community there in Oxford that Jackson is also part of. So there's all those ties there. But for Ole Miss, I think you did what you wanted to, which is you teed yourself up to potentially get him on campus for an official visit. He's got some locked in. He's trying to finalize that visit schedule and really hone in on that for this summer. He visits Michigan. He visits Ohio State coming up. But I think you can see Ole Miss securely in the picture for him moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think they are in the picture. Just got to get that official visit scheduled, make sure it happens before a decision. And I think they're right there. Speaking of being right there, Steve Wiltfong says Ole Miss is the team when it comes to quarterback Landon Duckworth out of the state of Alabama. He's 6'3", 190, big-time quarterback that everybody's recruiting. Why do you think Steve's putting in a prediction for Ole Miss?
I just think Ole Miss has done the best job recruiting him. And they got him on campus in February, I guess. He would have gotten on campus the end of January, that first weekend of February, where that was his only visit that he took to kick off the year. And that really set the tone with him. He's a basketball state champion. He spent a lot of time doing that, but he also spent time in Oxford multiple times now, and that's really stuck with him. And he's been on record multiple times saying Ole Miss is the team to beat. And best with quarterback dominoes, of course, things can get interesting as these officials really ramp up, as they battle your Georgia, your South Carolina, your Florida State, some of these other programs that are in the mix for him. But Landon Duckworth, kind of similar to what Jackson Dart brings to the table from throwing the football and running it, Landon Duckworth can do that as well. He's a super athlete. I think he's really somebody that sees some of the ability to kind of do it all in this Ole Miss offense is something that really stands out to him. And I think he just likes the vibe in Oxford. It's kind of a calm college town, off the beaten path a little bit. But when you get there, they've really done a nice job of making it feel like a family at Ole Miss. As much as Lane Kiffin gets out there on social media and things like that, and there's kind of that glitz and glamour of that, and of course, the Portal King aspect, they've really prioritized recruiting high school quarterbacks and developing them. And how Austin Simmons has looked in spring ball, which is something that Landon Duckworth got an up-close look at, I think really stood out. And Ole Miss has teed themselves up very well here. They're getting the last official, and they have a lot of reasons to feel confident that they can get him across the finish line.
All right. Well, one thing we know about Lane Kiffin and quarterback recruiting is he probably has more than 2 names on the board. So who else is a priority? Who else is Lane Kiffin focused in on when it comes to the quarterback position?
Yeah, a trio of names really stand out to me at this point. I would say Gavin Sidwar, who's been on campus for spring ball, spent multiple days with the coaching staff, is a 4-star prospect who is out of Pennsylvania, but maybe stays up north, maybe Syracuse, maybe some of those other programs. Mm-hmm. But I think Ole Miss is kind of in there and still recruiting him pretty heavily as maybe a QB2 with like a Landon Duckworth. So that's something that he'd have to really kind of drill down into and see if he wanted to be a part of. And then you flip it and you go all the way out to the West Coast. Luke Fahey out of California is another standout name that they're after. Again, somebody who I think you need to see him visit and really show a little bit more interest to kind of rise up the more legitimate names. But if I'm keeping an eye on another quarterback in this class for Ole Miss, it's Reese Wise out of Austin Westlake. He's a 3-star prospect, but Austin Westlake is a quarterback factory, and so he's kind of been groomed as somebody who can wait his turn. And even if he came in with a Landon Duckworth, or even if he had to sit there and wait for a player like Austin Simmons to do his thing and then graduate, or AJ Maddox who's on campus, he'd be okay with doing that because that's kind of the culture around Austin Westlake. So Ole Miss offered earlier this year. They also have the last official visit. Funny enough, the same weekend, Landon Duckworth is set to visit Ole Miss, and I think they're in a good spot there.
All right. Well, Billy, you're the expert. How do you see this quarterback dominoes playing out for Ole Miss?
Right now, it seems like a pretty good bet to have Landon Duckworth and Reese Wise as the 2 quarterbacks in this class for Ole Miss. And, there's no secret. Obviously, Landon Duckworth's gone on the record saying Ole Miss is his leader. That has held up over multiple months now. And so they've just got to, keep pushing that in the right direction and get all the details figured out. And I would think, get him. And then Reese Wise, he's made no secret, how much he's enjoyed getting to know Lane Kiffin and just what they all bring to the table. He'll be back on campus as well here soon for spring, and then we'll get back for that official. So those are, funny enough, for Ole Miss right now, the dominoes seem to be perfectly lined up, and they just have to not, add any weird variables into there.
Yeah, really. So Ole Miss fans, talk to us. How are you feeling about quarterback recruiting, and who do you think ultimately ends up signing with Ole Miss? Let us know. Comment section below. Will there ever be another Nick Saban? Nick Saban is known as the greatest of all time, a 7-time national champion head coach, 5-time SEC Coach of the Year, and was named National Coach of the Year twice. Saban was feared by his opponents, respected by everyone around him, the greatest winner the sport has ever seen, and widely regarded as the greatest recruiter in the history of college football. The real question, will there ever be another Nick Saban? In this video, we'll relive some legendary Nick Saban recruiting stories, examine the dominance of Saban's tenure in college football, and if the landscape will ever allow for another version of the greatest of all time. But first, Alabama fans and recruiting fans of all teams, be sure to smash the subscribe button below. Help our channel continue to grow. Thank you. All right, let's take a look at where the legend began. Nick Saban is originally from West Virginia, and like many greats, had to start from the bottom before he rose through the ranks. His first job was as a graduate assistant at Kent State in the early 70s, and from there, Coach Saban would ascend as a defensive back mastermind. He spent time at 4 different Power 5 programs over the span of 10 years before taking a job as the defensive backs coach for Houston Oilers of the NFL in 1981. After just a season in the big leagues, he took his first head coaching position with the Toledo Rockets, and after 4 successful seasons, it was back to the NFL, where he would link up with Bill Belichick and the Cleveland Browns as their defensive coordinator from 1987 to 1991. Now, the story of the national champion, hard-ass head coach you're probably familiar with, begins right about here, when on January 7th, 1999, Nick Saban would accept the head coaching position with the LSU Tigers. At LSU, Nick Saban won his first national championship in 2003. Although the recruiting rankings were still in its infancy stage, and in 2002 and 2003, the Tigers finished right around the number 40 ranking. After the 2004 season, Nick Saban finally got to pursue his dream of being a head coach in the NFL with the Miami Dolphins. But thankfully for Crimson Tide fans, things went south extremely quickly. The Dolphins missed the playoffs in both of Nick Saban's years as head coach, and after the team passed on signing Drew Brees in the 2006 offseason and a lack of on-field success, Coach Saban's frustration would lead him to take the Alabama head coach opening after his wife, Terry, convinced him to meet with Alabama's athletic director, Mal Moore.
And I think everybody should take the attitude that we're working to be a champion, that we want to be a champion in everything that we do. Every choice, every decision, everything that we do every day, we want to be a champion. Everyone take ownership for what they need to do relative to their role, and whatever it is, whether it's being a fan, being a booster, be a good one. Any kind of supporter that you are for this team, everyone take ownership that we support each other so we can have the best possible football program that Alabama's ever had.
Now, if you've lived on planet Earth over the past 2 decades, it's no secret that Alabama has been the standard of college football success. In his 17 seasons in Tuscaloosa, Saban would win 6 national championships, 11 SEC crowns, and 16 division titles. Not too shabby. But we all know the age-old saying, players make plays, and Nick Saban always found a way to get the best players to come to Alabama. The recruiting accolades for one head coach almost don't seem real. In his time, Alabama finished with 11 number 1 overall recruiting classes and 15 classes in the top 3. One of the most memorable recruiting stories of Nick Saban's legendary run at Alabama was the story of Jesse Williams. Many players have come and gone throughout the Crimson Tide dynasty, but Jesse Williams is a player Nick Saban will never forget. Williams was born and raised in Australia and had spent just 2 years in America before transferring to Alabama in 2011. At that point in time, his parents had still never been to the United States. Saban, in his efforts to recruit the Aussie, set up several Zoom calls with his parents on the other side of the world. Saban was quoted as saying, his parents knew nothing about American college, nothing about training technique. They knew nothing about anything. They were great people, just fantastic people. Saban describes the final day of his recruitment after about 5 or 6 Zoom calls with Jesse's parents. Arthur, Jesse's father, came on the line and he said, well, I've decided where I want Jesse to go to school. My heart just dropped. They hadn't been here on an official visit, never been to America, and I'm thinking he's not coming to Alabama when his dad says that. Saban then asked, well, how did you come to this decision, Arthur? And he said, I've got 25 schools calling me here and all they ever talk about is Alabama. So I think you guys must be the best. So that's where I want Jesse to go. And that's how we got it. The dawning allure and power of Alabama's brand would win the many recruiting battles. That of Najee Harris, who, after being committed to Alabama for over a year, he was quoted as saying, I'm an enigma, when a reporter begged him for his final decision at the All-American game just weeks before his final announcement. Harris, following the game, was heavily monitored as he prepared to board a flight. The catch? It was unclear his destination. Would it be Alabama or Michigan? After much debate, the Alabama staff convinced him to pop up in Tuscaloosa, sealing his commitment in the number 1 class in America. Saban's recruitment of Deshaun Hand, the nation's top recruit in 2014, showcased his strategic approach. Hand, who had over 90 scholarship offers, was drawn to Alabama not just for its football program, but also for the pitch Nick Saban gave about its reputable civil engineering department, allowing Hand to pursue his goals academically. Nick Saban was obviously a master recruiter in his own right, but also surrounded himself with several of the best in the country, allowing the Crimson Tide to wreak havoc on the recruiting scene for over a decade. He accrued some of the most memorable recruiting classes of all time, like the 2008 class where it all began, as many attribute the genesis of the dynasty to recruitments like Julio Jones and others early like Mark Ingram and Marcel Darris. All in all, Nick Saban set the standard for what it means to be a leader, a winner, and obviously a top-level recruiter. Will there ever be another Nick Saban? Let us know in the comments section.